They say time heals all wounds. But what if time doesn't move forward? What if it loops back, forcing you to relive your worst moment, just to see if you'll survive it this time? The day Marshall Whitlock's grandson was kidnapped is burned into my memory like wildfire in dry grass. That same scorching afternoon, my husband, Captain Rowan Lyle, wasn't out leading a search, or rallying troops, or even bothering to answer his radio. Number He was hunched over a stove in the barracks kitchen, brewing ancient herbal tea for his delicate cousin, Melina, who claimed her fever might end her. I didn't wait for him. I threw myself in the line of danger, fists trembling but ready, and lunged at the traffickers who were dragging little Avery Whitlock, barely 6 years old, into a rusted van. One of them slashed at me. Then another. I don't remember how many knives pierced my skin that day. I only remember the red soaking through my blouse like ink on wet paper, and Avery's wide eyes watching in terror. In my first life, I screamed for Rowan. I begged him to come. And he did. Just in time. He gritted his teeth, pulled Avery from their arms, and even won a medal for it. But Melina, she died that night. Her fever raging out of control. The army blamed me for delaying Rowan. He never said it, but I saw it in his eyes. He forgave me. Or so I thought. Until the night I gave birth. He locked the door behind me, muttered some excuse about protecting me, and then stabbed me. Once. Then again. 20 times. My own blood formed a hot lake beneath me as my baby cried, and then didn't. I saw his face just before darkness took me. Cold. Twisted. You staged that kidnapping to get Melina out of the way. He hissed. You couldn't stand that I loved her more. She was pregnant, Delia. Did you know that? Now they're both gone. Your jealousy killed them. He left me to rot in that shed, alone with my dying child. And then I opened my eyes. My throat burned. My limbs screamed. Blood flooded my mouth, the metallic taste so sharp it made me gag. Someone was crushing my neck. I blinked hard and saw the room. Dirty, dank, full of mold and rotting newspaper. My head was being held down, the floor beneath me rough and splintered. I knew that smell. That fear. That day. I was back. Back in the moment I had once chosen death over fighting. I coughed and yanked my arm away from the brute pinning me. Dario Lynn, the trafficker who made my skin crawl even in memory. But I was too weak. He sneered and slammed my skull into the floor twice. Why couldn't you just mind your damn business, Delia? Teach your school kids. Keep your nose out of grown men's work. Footsteps shuffled behind him. Another man came in, one whose stench hit me before his presence did. Grease-slicked hair, bulbous nose, teeth like chipped tile. Jorvin, Dario's cousin. She's gonna die anyway, Jorvin said with a grin that made my stomach lurch. Why not let me break her in first? I've never had a military wife before. You're disgusting, Dario growled, but after a few seconds of Jorvin begging like a mangy dog, he rolled his eyes. Fine, but don't make a mess, and keep watch afterward. Jorvin grabbed me by the arm. I forced myself to smile through cracked lips. Can we not do this in front of the boy? I whispered. He blinked, confused. Avery, he's just a kid. Next to me, Avery was trembling like a leaf. His tiny hands were zip-tied behind his back. Snot, sweat, and tears ran down his face. And yet he didn't make a sound. That boy was stronger than most grown men. Jorvin huffed, cursed, and dragged me into the next room. The moment the door clicked shut, I sprang into action. This time, I wasn't the same scared woman. Thanks to Rowan's obsession with camping knots and survival tips, I knew exactly how to loosen rope restraints. I waited until his back was turned, grabbed a splintered stool leg off the ground, and with every ounce of strength I had, slammed it into the side of his skull. He crumpled like a sack of meat, groaning, then still. In my past life, I'd made the fatal mistake of trying to find Rowan. I thought he'd fix everything. Not this time. This time, I'd save Avery Whitlock with my own blood-streaked hands if I had to. Dario shouted from the front room. He'd heard something. I crouched behind the door, stool leg trembling in my hands, heart thudding like a war drum. When he opened the door, I attacked, screaming as I brought the wood down across his back. He roared, spun, and slapped me so hard the world shattered into spinning stars. He punched, kicked, dragged me across the floor like garbage. Blood poured down my chin and soaked my shirt, but I still crawled after him when he went for Avery. "Let him go," I gasped, wrapping myself around his ankle. "You just don't learn." He howled and kicked me so hard I vomited blood. Then he pulled a knife. It tore into me like lightning. One strike, then another. My arms, thighs, stomach. I don't know how I stayed conscious. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was that little boy staring at me like I was his only hope in this world. "The boy is here," I kept whispering, even as my vision turned red. "Avery's here." And then I heard it. Shouting. Doors crashing. Boots pounding against concrete. Help. Real help. And as I faded into the void again, I swore to myself, if I get one more chance, one more breath, I will never waste it on Rowan Lyle again. I woke up with the weight of death still clinging to my chest like soaked wool. My lungs seized. My vision blurred. Then the world cleared just enough for me to see the edge of a hospital ceiling and smell antiseptic in the air. I was alive. Somehow. The door slammed open with a thunder that made my bones flinch. "Miss Renly?" The voice cracked from emotion. It was Avery. He hurled himself into my arms, his face streaked with mucus and tears. "You're awake," he sobbed, clutching me so tight it hurt, but I didn't stop him. He was warm, real. His tiny frame trembled in my arms, and I realized in that moment, this child had anchored me to life more than anything else. Behind him stood General Whitlock, the marshal himself, towering, decorated, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who could silence an entire battalion with a glance. He looked at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "Miss Renly," he said in a voice carved from stone, "thank you for reacting in time." But something in his tone made it clear. He wasn't sure if this was bravery or coincidence. His sharp gaze lingered too long, searching me for hidden motives. He knew no one just stumbles onto traffickers and sacrifices themselves for someone else's child. In my past life, he had rewarded Rowan with a promotion and a golden medal for quick action in saving Avery. That shiny piece of metal had launched Rowan's career to dizzying heights. But now, Rowan wasn't even there. Not during the kidnapping. Not when I bled out in the dirt. This time, the general launched an investigation the moment I was rushed into the ER. One of his guards brought in a full report, and I saw the way the general's eyes narrowed as he read the findings. He knew the truth. Rowan had abandoned his post. I could practically hear the hammer slamming down on his once proud military career. "If you ever need anything," General Whitlock said, folding the papers slowly, "don't hesitate to call me." He didn't say it, but the offer was heavy with meaning. Even more chilling, he added, "I can help. With Rowan, too." The implication wasn't lost on me. In the military world, to help someone meant you could either save them or destroy them. I didn't hesitate. I was just protecting my student, I replied, voice even. "Avery is in my class. That's all." His eyes glinted. Not suspicion this time, but a flicker of respect. And then pain came crashing back into my body like a freight train. My abdomen screamed as blood seeped through the white gauze. My vision turned white at the edges. Nurses came rushing in, panic buzzing like electricity as they changed my dressings. That's when the general snapped. "Find Rowan." He ordered one of his guards. "His wife almost died and he hasn't shown his face once?" Worthless. "No, please don't," I started, but too late. The door burst open. And there he was. Captain Rowan Lyle. Right behind him? Melina, of course. Her face was pale and tear-stained, like she'd been performing sorrow on stage. "Cousin, it's my fault," she said, rushing over to me. "I caught a cold. If I hadn't, Rowan would have been there for you. I'm so sorry." She hugged me. Tight. Too tight. Her arm pressed directly on the wound they'd just redressed. I screamed in agony and shoved her off. She blinked at me with watery eyes and said in a syrupy tone, "Sis, don't be mad. I'll apologize on his behalf. You're the older one. Can't you be the bigger person?" Ah, yes. That line again. You're older. So, I always had to sacrifice. Always had to forgive. My mind flashed back. Parents buried in a mining collapse. Me being handed off to my aunt and uncle. Melina's family. I had grown up in that house knowing that pleasing Melina was the only way I'd get to eat or sleep without bruises. Even my marriage to Rowan wasn't mine. Melina didn't want him. Said his career was going nowhere. So she threw him at me like a hand-me-down. Until he got promoted. Then, suddenly, she remembered how charming he was. I didn't look at him. Not even once. "You want to apologize?" I said coldly. "Then do it yourself. Don't offer me up like a sacrifice again." Rowan flinched, taken aback by my tone. His face twisted into a mask of irritation. "This is your fault," he snapped. "If you hadn't made such a big deal chasing after traffickers, none of this would have happened. I would have snuck out for 10 minutes, Melina wouldn't have been left alone, and none of this mess would have landed on me. You know how long my self-criticism report is going to be? Over 1,000 words. Ah, so that's what mattered to him. Not my stitches, not my trauma. His 1,000-word report. I stared him down. You're a soldier, and you left your post. Don't blame me for your cowardice." His jaw clenched. Melina could have fainted. I had to help her. Every time our marriage hit the smallest bump, Melina came down with another mystery illness. A fever, a sprained ankle, vertigo. Rowan always ran to her like she was glass about to shatter, and I, bleeding out in a hospital bed, was the burden. Melina chimed in again, fake sympathy dripping from her lips like honey gone bad. "Sis, you should go home. Ryan's already exhausted. Money's tight. It's hard for him to go back and forth." Then, casually, purposefully, she pressed on my leg, the one in a cast. Pain exploded like fireworks behind my eyes. I gasped. "You're fine," she cooed. "Home's more comfortable anyway." She started packing my things without asking, humming like she was tidying a picnic. Rowan said nothing. Not a word. I looked straight at him, eyes burning. "My leg is broken. My ribs are cracked. I was stabbed. How exactly am I supposed to go home?" His eyes darted away, uncomfortable. Melina leaned her head against his chest and whispered something I didn't catch. He nodded. "She's right. You'll be okay at home. We'll take care of you." We. That word slashed deeper than any knife. He left the room, leaving Melina behind with a triumphant smirk on her face. She waited until the door shut, then leaned in, eyes narrowed like a snake preparing to strike. "Delia Renly," she hissed. "Why couldn't you have just died?" Her voice was acid in my ears. 6 months ago, she'd wormed her way into our home, pretending to be a guest. Since then, she'd been driving wedges between us, telling Rowan I was paranoid, overly emotional, ungrateful. At first, he defended me. Then he stopped. Then he started believing her. I used to cry when he doubted me. Now I only felt fury. One day, he'd accuse me of jealousy again, of overthinking, of being difficult. But next time, I'd look him dead in the eye and say, "You're right." Because the truth is, I did feel jealous. Jealous that Melina could burn everything around her and still be adored for the warmth. But not anymore. Now I just felt done. When Rowan lifted Melina in his arms and rushed out of the hospital like she were made of glass, I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, broken in both body and spirit, watching the man I had once trusted with my life vanish with the woman who had stolen everything from me, my peace, my dignity, and now even my pain. She had hijacked it, turned it into her story, and Rowan had bought it every single time. He turned back once to tell me to hurry up, as though I was being dramatic for limping behind with shattered bones and an IV in my arm. By the time I got to the car, I was drenched in sweat, biting my lip so hard it bled just to keep myself from collapsing. He didn't help me in. He didn't even open the door. Melina, of course, was cradled in the passenger seat like a princess in a fairy tale. She turned to me as I got in and said sweetly, "Don't worry, cousin. You can sleep in my room tonight if you're too tired to be in yours." And I knew what that meant. She was staking claim to my bed, my husband, and the life she once rejected. That night, as Rowan fussed over her fever, running back and forth with damp cloths and bowls of porridge like some love-struck houseboy, I made my way into the bedroom I hadn't seen in days. Or rather, what used to be my bedroom. Now, her perfume clung to the curtains, her jewelry sparkled on the dresser. Her presence devoured every corner like mold in a forgotten house. I reached into my nightstand to retrieve the one thing that still felt like home, my mother's jade pendant, the only keepsake I had left from her. The velvet box was empty. Gone. I felt something inside me rupture. Something final. "Where is it?" I whispered, storming back into the living room. Melina looked up from the couch with feigned confusion. "Where's what?" "My mother's pendant. It was in the drawer. It's missing." She gave me a lazy shrug, smirking. "You really think I have time to go through your things?" "Cut the act," I snapped, my voice hoarse from days of blood and betrayal. "You took it. I don't care who helped you. I want it back." She stood and met my gaze, and for the first time, she dropped the mask. "Fine. I took it, and I threw it in the river." My knees nearly buckled. "You're lying." "I'm not," she said coolly. "You think that trinket means anything? You're nothing without your little sad memories. That pendant? Just another worthless rock. Like you." I don't remember lunging at her. I only remember the hollow crack as she raised the wooden box and smashed it into my head. Blood poured down my temple. And still I didn't fall. Until she kicked me. Again. Again. Over and over. When Rowan walked in, I was on the floor, dazed, barely able to breathe. Melina fell to the ground in perfect timing, clutching her face and wailing. "She hit me," she cried. "I was only trying to comfort her." Rowan didn't even ask. He just shoved me so hard I slammed into the corner of the cabinet. My shoulder cracked. My ribs screamed. "Enough," he yelled. "You're out of control." That was when I said it. Calm, quiet, final. "Let's get a divorce." Melina gasped, then smirked. "Fine. But you're not leaving with a dime. Everything here was paid for by Rowan. You want to leave? Leave naked, and pay damages while you're at it." She stepped on my hand as she said it, heel grinding into flesh and bone. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood again. That night, I passed out from the pain. But not for long, because the door burst open once again. But this time, it was justice. General Whitlock stood in my living room, flanked by 2 officers. His uniform practically glowed under the cheap overhead lights. He took one look at me, bleeding and crumpled on the floor, and snapped, "Who did this?" Rowan's face turned gray. "Sir, I didn't, I was just—" "Save it," the general barked. "This woman saved my grandson. And you beat her to the ground? Is this how a commander behaves? Strip him." Melina leapt to her feet, fire flashing in her eyes. "You don't get to talk to him like that. He's a commander. Who even are you?" The general raised an eyebrow. "You don't know who I am?" He turned to the officer beside him. "Lieutenant, enlighten her." The man cleared his throat. "General Whitlock, Marshal, Supreme Command of the 3rd Division. Melina paled. Her lips parted. Her eyes darted toward Rowan, panic rising. Rowan looked like the earth had split beneath him. Sir, please, I didn't know. You didn't know your own wife was bleeding out in your living room? The general asked coldly. You don't deserve the uniform you wear. He reached over, ripped Rowan's badge from his chest, and threw it to the ground. You're dismissed. Melina started yelling again, accusing me of seducing a rich old man, saying I was trading up now that I had a connection. The general laughed, a cold, sharp sound. I owe your cousin my grandson's life. And you? You deserve a cell. Then came the final nail in the coffin. As Melina fumed, the door opened again, this time not for generals, but for justice. A pair of Rowan's former military comrades walked in, holding documents. Melina Jiang, one said, we have testimony from the traffickers. You're under arrest for aiding multiple kidnapping attempts. Melina froze. What? But it was too late. The handcuffs clicked. She wailed, reaching for Rowan. Help me, I didn't do anything. She framed me. I'm pregnant with your child. Everything went still. My blood ran cold. She was pregnant? The room spun. Rowan looked at me, stammering. Delia, it was a mistake. I didn't mean for... She said she felt dizzy. I walked right past him, out the door, into the night, free for the first time. And as the cold wind hit my face, I breathed in and whispered to myself, this is the beginning. I left behind the house like I was shedding skin, painfully but necessarily. My limbs ached, my wounds burned, but the ache in my chest felt lighter for the first time in years. The cold air outside bit into my skin, but it was honest, unlike that home. My steps led me, almost unconsciously, to the only place that had ever felt real. My parents' old house. A small, worn cottage on the outskirts of Maple Hollow, lined with ivy-stained bricks and shuttered windows that groaned in the wind. It had been empty for years. Ryan once said we should sell it. It was just taking up space. But I refused. Now I was glad I had. The doorknob was stiff, but the key still worked. The air inside was thick with dust and silence, a kind of peace that made my eyes sting with tears. This place had held laughter once. My mother's voice humming as she made mung bean pastries in the kitchen. My father's hands ruffling my hair after a long day down in the mines. Ghosts lived here, but kind ones. Ghosts that didn't hurt me. I cleaned all day, scrubbed until my knuckles bled and the floorboards gleamed. Each swipe of the rag was like exorcising the poison from my soul. I threw out every piece of memory I didn't want to carry. Letters, photos, things that had once tethered me to a man who never really saw me. By sunset, I'd finally finished. I lit a candle, made a pot of rice porridge, watery and bland. I didn't even have spices. But it was mine. I was just about to sit when I heard footsteps outside. My blood turned cold. I grabbed a broken stick I'd been using to stir the chimney and tiptoed toward the front door. The floor creaked. The latch trembled. My grip tightened. As the door cracked open, I swung. A strong hand caught the stick midair. Whoa! Whoa! Easy! It was Ben Carter. Tall, calm, a little embarrassed. He smiled sheepishly and held up a box in both hands. Peace offering, he said. Mung bean pastries. Thought you might want something warm. My hands fell to my sides. I stared at him, still clutching the stick. My heart was racing. You scared the hell out of me, I breathed. I could tell. He looked at my trembling hands. Sorry, I should have knocked. He stepped inside cautiously like a man unsure of his place, his boots leaving faint wet prints on the wood floor. I noticed he hadn't come empty-handed. The box was neatly tied with string, the scent of fresh pastry wafting into the room. I left behind the house like I was shedding skin, painfully but necessarily. My limbs ached, my wounds burned, but the ache in my chest felt lighter for the first time in years. The cold air outside bit into my skin, but it was honest, unlike that home. My steps led me, almost unconsciously, to the only place that had ever felt real: my parents' old house. A small, worn cottage on the outskirts of Maple Hollow, lined with ivy-stained bricks and shuttered windows that groaned in the wind. It had been empty for years. Ryan once said we should sell it. It was just taking up space. But I refused. Now I was glad I had. The doorknob was stiff, but the key still worked. The air inside was thick with dust and silence, a kind of peace that made my eyes sting with tears. This place had held laughter once. My mother's voice humming as she made mung bean pastries in the kitchen. My father's hands ruffling my hair after a long day down in the mines. Ghosts lived here, but kind ones. Ghosts that didn't hurt me. I cleaned all day, scrubbed until my knuckles bled and the floorboards gleamed. Each swipe of the rag was like exorcising the poison from my soul. I threw out every piece of memory I didn't want to carry. Letters, photos, things that had once tethered me to a man who never really saw me. By sunset, I'd finally finished. I lit a candle, made a pot of rice porridge, watery and bland. I didn't even have spices. But it was mine. I was just about to sit when I heard footsteps outside. My blood turned cold. I grabbed a broken stick I'd been using to stir the chimney and tiptoed toward the front door. The floor creaked. The latch trembled. My grip tightened. As the door cracked open, I swung. A strong hand caught the stick midair. Whoa! Whoa! Easy! It was Ben Carter. Tall, calm, a little embarrassed. He smiled sheepishly and held up a box in both hands. "Peace offering," he said. "Mung bean pastries. Thought you might want something warm." My hands fell to my sides. I stared at him, still clutching the stick. My heart was racing. You scared the hell out of me," I breathed. I could tell. He looked at my trembling hands. "Sorry, I should have knocked." He stepped inside cautiously like a man unsure of his place, his boots leaving faint wet prints on the wood floor. I noticed he hadn't come empty-handed. The box was neatly tied with string, the scent of fresh pastry wafting into the room. "I told Ethan I'd check on you. He wanted to come too, but I made him stay and finish his homework." He set the box down on the table and glanced around the room. "You did all this today?" I nodded. Every inch. His gaze lingered on my bandaged arms, the bruises still purpling along my jaw. "I can't believe you did it all alone." "I've done harder things," I said quietly. Something flickered in his eyes. Not pity, something deeper. He stepped toward the table and peered into my bowl. "This what you were planning to eat?" I winced. It looked like something scooped from a sewer. Overcooked noodles swimming in sad gray water. I shrugged awkwardly. I was tired. He didn't say anything, just sighed, dumped the bowl into the sink, and rolled up his sleeves. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Saving your taste buds from a slow death." He moved with the precision of someone used to chaos. Water boiled, a pan hissed. An egg cracked open and sizzled golden in the skillet. Within 10 minutes, he'd turned my kitchen into something alive. Real food, real smells, the kind that fill you with warmth before you even take a bite. He served the noodles and egg with a quiet pride. "Try it." I did. It was simple, comforting, a far cry from gourmet. But every bite felt like something solid after weeks of broken things. I looked at him. "You're full of surprises." He chuckled. "I get that a lot." When I finished, he cleaned up everything without being asked. Washed every dish, dried them, put them neatly back. Before leaving, he paused awkwardly by the door. He scratched the back of his neck. "I don't want to assume anything, but if you ever need help around here, just ask." "Thank you," I whispered. He smiled, nodded once, and left. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. That night, I slept deeper than I had in years. No nightmares, no blood, no Rowan. Just quiet, just peace. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of giggles outside my window. I peeked through the curtain. Ethan was outside in the frost, a paper dragonfly cupped in his hands, carefully tiptoeing toward the door. I opened it before he could knock. "Miss Renly?" He beamed. "Look, I made you something." He handed it over proudly, but tripped as he did, and the dragonfly crumpled on the porch. His face crumbled with it. "I broke it," he said, eyes filling with tears. I knelt down, touched his arm. "It's okay." Before I could say more, Ben appeared behind him, crouched down, and with deft hands gently repaired the bent wings and snapped frame. "There," he said, placing it in my hands. "Good as new." Ethan's eyes lit up. "See? Dad's the best." Ben blushed. Just then, Ethan peered up at me and blurted, "Miss Renly, your face is really red. Are you cold?" I laughed, pressing my palm to my cheek. It burned. Number just warm. Ben scooped Ethan into his arms, planted a soft kiss on his cheek. The love in his eyes was quiet, but it glowed like firelight. That night, they stayed for dinner. We didn't do anything grand, just a few fried dumplings, steamed rice, and miso soup. But we laughed. We told stories. Ethan mimicked his teachers. Ben cracked a joke about burning toast during survival camp. I didn't even realize I was smiling until Ethan pointed it out. "You laugh pretty when you're happy." After they left, I stood at the door, scarf wrapped around my shoulders, watching them walk away under the stars. Their silhouettes fading in the quiet dark. I didn't feel lonely. I felt steady, safe. The next day, Ben came back with wood to fix the old gate, then helped me seal a drafty window, then showed up with new pots and seeds for my garden. "Just in case spring comes early this year," he said. And each time he stood on that doorstep, I felt something chip away from the armor I'd built. Until one afternoon, as I handed him a scarf I'd knitted by hand, dark gray wool, soft and warm, he looked at me like I'd handed him a piece of the moon. "It's new," I said quickly. I didn't want you to think someone else gave it to you." He put it on immediately. That night, I fell asleep hugging my pillow, smiling like a fool. It was terrifying, because for the first time in my life, I was starting to hope again. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtain, a soft golden glow that painted the walls with the warmth of a life I'd thought I'd never taste again. I stood in the kitchen, barefoot on cool tiles, slicing apples for a tart I wasn't even sure would turn out right. But for once, it wasn't about perfection. It was about peace. The radio played softly behind me, a jazz tune that had no lyrics, just warmth, when a knock came at the door. I wiped my hands on my apron and opened it slowly, expecting Ben or Ethan. But it was him, Rowan. He looked like a shell of the man he once was. Hollow eyes, gaunt cheeks, hair unkempt and beard patchy. His uniform was gone, replaced with wrinkled clothes and desperation. The pride that once stiffened his spine had melted into a slump. "Susan," he said softly, "I didn't want to wake you. I made breakfast. Your favorite porridge. Remember?" I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just stared at him with the stillness of someone who'd already said goodbye a long time ago. "I miss you," he whispered, voice cracking. "Please come home." "There's nothing left to come home to," I replied, gently but firmly. "We both know that." He stepped forward, holding out a thermos like it was some sacred offering. "We can start over. You wanted a baby, didn't you? We can try. I've changed. I'll be better. Please." That word, please, had once meant everything to me. Now it was a sound that came too late. "You once told me having a child would ruin your focus, that I'd get in the way. You said it like I was a distraction from your future." I said, My voice even, my grip firm on the door. So don't bring that dream back just to keep me from walking away. He looked stunned, like he couldn't fathom that I had found the strength to speak the truth. I continued, "We both know you've always loved Melina more, even if you didn't say it out loud. So go be with her. Whatever's left of her." He froze, his eyes suddenly wide. "She's gone," he admitted. "They took her. The court? They found her guilty." "I know." It had been public. Melina's trial made headlines across the region. As the investigation into the kidnapping ring deepened, her name came up again and again. There were bank deposits, voice recordings, even an intercepted letter written in code that she foolishly thought no one could crack. She was sentenced to Southborough, 12 years. Her mother was charged with obstruction and conspiracy. Rowan, well, his involvement was quieter, but not invisible. The authorities gave him 3 years of probation for aiding and abetting after it was discovered he'd helped Melina falsify documents and dodge suspicion during early investigations. He'd lost everything. I swear I didn't know she was doing all that. I thought she was just sick. Just needed help. "You thought wrong," I said. "You always did." He reached out suddenly, tried to touch my hand. But I stepped back, letting the motion hang in the air. "Please say something, Susan," he begged, voice low. "Anything." "Let's finalize the divorce," I said, staring into his eyes. "No more delays. No more excuses. Just end it. You're free now. So am I." The words hit him like a punch. His shoulders sagged. He opened his mouth to protest, but nothing came out. After a few seconds, he gave a hollow nod and walked away. This time, I didn't watch him go. I closed the door and turned around. Back into my kitchen. Back into my world. Later that afternoon, we went to the Civil Affairs office to register the final divorce. Everything was mechanical. Name, ID, signature, fingerprint. The woman behind the desk barely looked up. But just as I finished signing, I heard familiar voices near the door. Melina's mother. And Melina herself, chained and surrounded by officers. She looked like a ghost, pale, thin, trembling. Her eyes met mine and something shifted in her face. Contempt turned to rage. "This is all your fault," she shrieked, thrashing. "You jealous, wretched." The guards tightened their grip, pulling her back. "Liar," she screamed. "You framed me, tell them the truth." I said nothing, but she kept twisting, spitting curses even as the door slammed shut behind her. And just like that, they were gone. I held the divorce certificate in my hands. It was just a piece of paper. But it felt heavier than any medal Rowan had ever won. That evening, as the sunset dipped low and painted the sky in coral streaks, I returned home. To my home. To find smoke curling from the kitchen chimney. I walked faster, my heartbeat light with anticipation. Ethan was the first to spot me. "Miss Renly," he shouted, running toward me full speed. "You're back." He barreled into my arms, nearly knocking the wind out of me. His joy was pure, unfiltered, the kind of love no one could fake. From the kitchen, Ben peeked out, apron tied crookedly and spatula in hand. "You caught me making air soup again." He grinned. "You'll never let me live that down." "I wouldn't dream of it," I replied, stepping inside. The kitchen smelled like miso and sesame. Plates were already set on the table. And in the center sat a vase, small, ceramic, chipped at the bottom, holding 3 wild daisies. Ben looked at me, a touch of nervousness in his eyes. "Ethan picked those. Said it needed to look like home." "It does," I whispered. "It really does." Dinner passed in laughter and warm glances. Afterward, Ethan dragged me outside to play hopscotch on the porch, while Ben stayed behind to wash the dishes. His silhouette in the window was so natural, so quietly present it almost made me ache. When I finally sat down to rest, he brought out a glass of warm water and set it beside me without a word. And then he sat beside me, quiet for a long time. The stars were beginning to appear, blinking softly in the twilight sky. Delia, he said, using my name so gently, have you ever thought about being with someone new? I turned to look at him. His jaw was tight, his fingers clasped together. His voice steady, but his eyes were filled with nervous hope. I know you've been through hell, he continued. I know healing isn't linear, and I'm not here to fix anything. I'd like to be someone who stands beside you while you rebuild. For a moment, I said nothing. Then I reached over and took his hand in mine. I'm not whole, I whispered. You don't have to be, he said. I'm not either. That night, we